Hello, Heroes and Zargons. It's been a while since we did a For Kids video, and I wanted to talk a little bit about one of my son's favorite parts of the game, quest design. Before I talk through the process, though, here are a few of Terry's favorite moments from the quest we're about to discuss.
All right, Terry, so this was the first quest you ever created. Don't tell us everything about it, but tell us a few of your favorite parts. What are some of the things that were most memorable for you about this first quest?
I like the story. I remember the cat part the most. The one where the part where you need to find the cat. It says you need to find the king's cat and rescue him. I remember that. And I remember I like to play this quest. I feel like it I think it's good.
So tell me, are there any of the rooms on this quest that you think are really fun or big surprises or things that you like to do?
Room B. I like it because there's like a queen guarding her treasure, or I forget the name, but somebody's guarding their treasure with two guards, a goblin and a chaos warrior. And I like that there's ice at the door.
Do you remember what spells you gave that sorcerer?
I know that has Firestorm. Most of my sorcerers have Firestorm. But I don't remember any other spells. Ball of Flame, maybe? But
Rust, right?
Oh yeah, Rust.
It's good to remember that you had Rust in there, because I think if you remember some of the playthroughs, we'll talk about those in a minute. That came in, that was important in some of the playthroughs that we did. Any other memorable rooms?
I remember room A, because I remember that the Chaos Warrior is eating pizza, and you can eat some of the pizza, I think.
Are there any other rooms that you wanted to mention?
Yes, D. Room D has an ice tunnel. Also some slippery ice, which you see in a few other rooms. The ice tunnel just goes back to the beginning.
What was the deal with the goblin in room D?
Oh, yeah. The goblin in room D, this goblin has a sneaking gift. As soon as the first hero emerges from the hole, he attacks.
Yeah, do you remember designing that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that part was cool. Okay, so you've now played this quest with me, your mama, Uncle Jesse, Matt, and did you play it with Perry too?
No.
Okay, so you played it with at least 4 people. Were there any things that you remember from the different playthroughs that you thought were interesting?
I think Nan and Papa played through it too.
Oh, cool.
But I remember that somebody opened the door. I think it was on the play with Nan and Papa. They opened the door to the room that has only a Femir, and then they tried to fight the boss with a Femir alive.
Oh no!
It was coming up at them at the back, and they were slipping on the ice, and then wham! It was like attacking them every turn.
Whoa!
And it was crazy.
Were there any other things that were memorable?
When Mama played, I think that she ended going through the tunnel D. And then coming up and down the stairs. So she got a shortcut there.
Got a shortcut back?
Yeah.
That's good. I like that. I like that. Did anyone have any trouble with the sorcerer?
Oh, yes. So I know that I got to firestorm all of their heroes and most of my monsters.
Nice.
So I got, and they were like 3, 4, 5. So they were down to like 1, 2, and 3. So
1, 2, 3 body points, you mean?
Yeah. 1, 2, or 3 body points.
Yeah, I think that might have been Uncle Jesse, because do you remember what happened to his barbarian when he stepped into that room?
No.
Slipped on the slippery ice.
Oh
Lost
yeah.
a turn. Yep.
I remember rusting someone's broadsword, but there's a short sword on the weapon rack.
Yeah, so that was pretty wild because then they had to fight with one combat die for a while. Yeah, cool. This was a great first quest, Terry. I'm going to explain a few things about it, how we designed it to people, and then we'll put some overlays on, we'll post some video, and we'll see what people think.
All right.
My son was an early reader and an early gamer, but he was also an early Zargon. We played about 5 quests before he realized that he could Zargon, and not long after that, he was asking to design his own quests. I foresaw a couple of hurdles: narrative cohesion, challenge, and coherence. Terry mostly plays with adults, and I wanted to help him make sure his levels were as fun for the heroes to play as they were for him to design. That meant, for the first one, we worked hand in hand. I'm going to talk through our process today, and we'll look at the results. Hopefully, it'll give those other HQ enthusiasts out there with kids of their own a few ideas for how to introduce the creative side of the game. At 4, I thought the best plan was to make quest design tactile, so while Terry had seen me design on HeroQuest Builder, we got the board out. I constrained him to the items from the base game and a few non-base tiles that were in the same storage container, most of them from the Frozen Horror. We started with a stairway room and a first dungeon room. He laid out a few monsters and a few traps. When he was thinking about where to go from there, I mentioned that it's often useful to have branching paths so that the heroes have choices about how to approach the dungeon. He then laid out a couple more rooms, and I stopped him again and asked, "Before you go on, why are the heroes in this dungeon?" This was a puzzler, but I told him that it was easier to design a dungeon if you know what the goals are. Terry came up with the idea of the stolen cat, who had been given to a sorcerer for experimentation, and we suddenly had 2 adversaries for our branching paths: the thief, who's a gargoyle, and the sorcerer. Terry and I built out the sorcerer's path first, and he more or less had a good feel for monster difficulty. I asked him at one point whether new heroes would play this quest or experienced ones, and guided him on monster selection based on that. I think I may have cautioned him about only having 1 to 2 Chaos Warriors in a dungeon, for example. In any case, as the sorcerer room came together, it looked to be very dangerous, and I asked him what the heroes could get from defeating her, introducing the principle of commensurate risk for commensurate reward. Terry chose the items in the chest from the treasure deck. One is a treasure hoard and the other is a potion of healing. Then, because I noticed that he had selected a rust spell for his sorcerer, I pointed out the problem for new heroes. That hero whose weapon got rusted would have an ineffectual attack for the rest of the game, and that might not be a good time. He took a look at the armory and elected to put a short sword on the weapon rack, which was a nice touch since it slightly downgrades the barbarian's attack, and the barbarian is the most likely target for that spell, making rust a major inconvenience for the fight against the sorcerer, and then a minor one for the remainder of the dungeon. To design the sorcerer, I gave Terry a range of numbers that would be appropriate for each stat and explained why I was thinking about that range. Terry picked a number, and we went on. After laying out the dungeon, Terry wanted to include more traps, so we talked about why traps are tricky. Heroes need to have a chance of setting them off, but the traps shouldn't be placed in such a way that they are unavoidable. So the initial design principles I gave Terry were: 1. Make sure that the monsters are suitable challenge for the heroes. 2. Have a narrative in mind to design the dungeon around. 3. Commensurate reward for commensurate risk. 4. Give the heroes a chance to avoid traps. And 5. Boss battles should usually occur in the center room. As Terry built, I recorded on HeroQuest Builder. The heroes begin in the southwest quadrant and either proceed to the northwest quadrant where they encounter the gargoyle sorcerer, or the northeast where they probably encounter the gargoyle. Since there are 2 mini-bosses in this dungeon, I added a little note about finding the cat to ensure that the heroes need to take on both. From this first tactile quest design, Terry graduated quickly to designing directly on HeroQuest Builder. We collaborated on his Lava Quest pack, designing that on the screen. Then, because Terry's mama likes playing a lot less than I, Terry began designing on his own, and she put the quest notes in for him. He builds the dungeon, she writes up the notes, and then he and I do battle. We still occasionally design on the board collaboratively, and these quest designs are a good time to address additional design principles or refresh on old ones. We'll talk through another one of these when I review his Quest Jam submission. For now, Zargons and Heroes, What are you doing to help your kids design quests? Let's plot together in the comments below.